I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, Jimmy Carter.
I, Barack Hussein Obama.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
So help you God. So help me God. So help me God.
So help me God.
So help me God. So help me God.
So help you God. So help me God.
So help me God.
What if I told you there was a secret audio diary of a U.S. president? A series of recordings capturing every whisper, every rant, accusation, secret deal made in the most powerful room on earth. Hold your popcorn as we're about to press play on the secret history of the 37th President of the United States, Richard Nixon. And you won't believe what the tapes revealed.
Bigotry about people in the third world. There's a lot of sort of barnyard cursing, unpleasant amount of backstabbing, duplicitous.
Nixon didn't just dislike his political opponents. He saw them as enemies, not only to his agenda, but to the very fabric of America itself. This wasn't just politics for him. It was war. And in war, you need intelligence. You need to know your enemy. Believe it or not, Nixon's White House kept an actual physical list, the Nixon's Enemies List. This wasn't just a list of rival politicians. It was a sprawling document that included journalists who wrote critical articles, actors who supported his opponents, academics, business leaders, and even celebrities. The goal of the list was simple and terrifying: to use the full power of the federal government, the IRS, the FBI, government contracts, to harass, intimidate, and neutralize his critics who will hinder his re-election. This level of paranoia needed its own private army, and Nixon definitely had one, known as the Plumbers, who were led by Howard Hunt, a former CIA agent, and Gordon Liddy, ex-FBI agent, two figures who already had a reputation of operating outside the law. Their job was to fix any unauthorized information that was leaking to the press. They started off by breaking into the office of Dr. Lewis Fielding, the psychiatrist of Daniel Ellsberg, aka the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers. They were trying to find dirt to discredit him. They found nothing, but it didn't matter. The line had been crossed.
What was in the nuclear papers that haunted you?
The estimates by the Joint Chiefs of how many they would kill if we had initiated nuclear war.
With a secret police unit like the Plumbers and a hit list of enemies, the stage was perfectly set for Watergate. The break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters on June 17, 1972 wasn't some random, foolish act. It was the logical next step for an administration that believed it was above the law, fighting a holy war against its enemies, where any tactic was justified.
Of burglars on a political spying mission inside Democratic National Headquarters at the Watergate Heights.
Two young reporters from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, started digging. What they uncovered, with the help of a secret informant known only as Deep Throat, was a big conspiracy of dirty tricks, illegal espionage, and political sabotage, all done and covered up by the highest levels of the Nixon administration. Nixon went ahead to dismiss the accusations as political smears and won the election in a landslide in November 1972. In April 1974, he was issued a subpoena that required him to hand over any secretly recorded tapes. And here is what he said in one of his speeches.
For full tapes of these conversations, so that they can determine for themselves beyond question that the transcripts are accurate and that everything on the tapes relevant to my knowledge and my actions on Watergate is included.
It was later revealed that he had bugged the Oval Office.
Mr. Butterfield, are you aware of the installation of any listening devices in the Oval Office of the President?
I was aware of.
And tapes revealed that Nixon knew the break-in was connected to his re-election campaign right from the start, and that he had personally ordered a cover-up, using the CIA to obstruct an FBI investigation. That wasn't just unethical, it was a felony. It was a direct abuse of presidential power. A public outcry followed, and he responded with one of his famously quoted speeches. Even his most loyal supporters in Congress couldn't defend it. When this tape was released, his support vanished overnight. Impeachment wasn't a possibility anymore, it was a certainty.
In one of the most difficult decisions of my presidency,
I accepted the resignations of two of my closest associates in the White House.
Oh, and remember that 18.5-minute gap on another key tape? His secretary, Rosemary Woods, claimed she accidentally erased it by stretching for the phone in an almost physically impossible way, which became known as the Rosemary stretch. No one knows for sure what was said in those 18.5 minutes.
Hold and tell you during the 18.5-minute gap.
There was no cover-up of any criminal
minutes. The tapes that Richard Nixon thought would be his legacy turned out to be his political end, written and recorded by the man himself. Richard Nixon was born on January 9, 1913, in a tiny house in Yorba Linda, California, to his father, Francis A. Nixon, and mother, Hannah Milhouse Nixon, a poor family who believed in the Quaker faith. His family ran a small lemon ranch that, like most of their ventures, struggled to turn a profit. This upbringing instilled in Nixon a relentless drive, a feeling that he was an outsider who had to fight and scrap for everything he got. He was a straight-A student, and even one of the popular kids playing football in high school. But all of this couldn't hide the insecure, emotionally bottled-up character that lay beneath, always in search for fulfillment. After graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in History from Whittier College in 1934, Nixon was accepted at the new Duke University Law School and admitted to the California bar in 1937. He began practicing in Whittier with the law firm Wingert and Bewley. Behind every successful man is a woman, they say. By Nixon's side was Thelma Pat Ryan. And while Richard was often seen as dark and brooding, Pat was graceful, poised, and beloved by the public. She was famously private and stoic, earning her the nickname Plastic Pat from some unkind journalists. But behind the scenes, she was a fiercely protective wife and mother. They had two daughters, Tricia and Julie. Julie married David Eisenhower, the grandson of former President Dwight D. Eisenhower, creating a sort of Republican political dynasty. Despite the political turmoil swirling around their father, the daughters were always his most passionate defenders, a role they continue to this day. A man's home is his castle, and Nixon had a few. His favorite was the sprawling oceanfront estate in San Clemente, California, which he dubbed La Casa Pacifica. This became known as the Western White House. It was a stunning Spanish-style mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He held meetings with world leaders there, like Soviet General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev, but it was also his sanctuary.
Originally built in 1926, the Spanish colonial revival-styled home has played host to 17 heads of state and even Hollywood celebs like Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, and Cesar Romero.
After the presidency, this became his refuge, and later he moved to be closer to his family in New York and then New Jersey, living a much more private, secluded life. And what about his money? Nixon's net worth at the time of his death was estimated to be around $15 million. A lot of money for sure, but a far cry from the billionaire politicians of today. He built his wealth through his political salary, savvy investments, and especially after his presidency, multi-million-dollar book deals. He literally wrote his way back to financial security. Aside from that, Nixon was a man with interesting taste buds and quirky behavior. Out of all possible food combos, guess which one Mr. President Nixon liked? None other than cottage cheese with ketchup. It was a go-to breakfast, lunch, and sometimes even a late-night snack.
You imagine being in the Oval Office as one of my friends, the many butlers who have told me, pretty much every day, Marty, he would have an ice-cold cottage cheese with ketchup all over the top.
His other favorite? A simple all-American meatloaf. In fact, his wife Pat Nixon's recipe for meatloaf became so famous that it was one of the most requested recipes from the White House. It's a bit funny, isn't it? While the world was on the brink of nuclear war, people were writing in asking, but how do you get the meatloaf so moist? And here's a fun fact for you. To de-stress, Nixon had a one-lane bowling alley installed in the basement of the White House. He was reportedly not a very good bowler, but he loved it. Nixon was obsessed with yellow legal pads. He was a compulsive note-taker and would sit for hours, meticulously scripting out his thoughts, even while debating on some of his political choices.
In the early hours of the morning, He took out his notepad and methodically listed the reasons why he should resign.
Okay, so we know the man, his habits, home, and family. That leads us to the next section. What did he actually do as president? Nixon was inaugurated as president on January 20th, 1969, sworn in by his one-time political rival, Chief Justice Earl Warren, making him the 37th president of the United States.
I was going to reorganize the government. I was going to cut down on the bureaucrats. I was going to return more power to the states and the people. I was going to shape up the place. They knew that.
On the world stage, he was a giant. His most historic accomplishment was, without a doubt, reopening relations with the People's Republic of China in 1972. For decades, America had pretended a nation of nearly 1 billion people didn't exist. Nixon, the staunch anti-communist, was the only one who could have pulled it off. His visit to China was a geopolitical earthquake that fundamentally reshaped the Cold War and the global economy.
Brought the Chinese and the Americans together. Was not a convergence of ideas, but a convergence of interests.
He also pursued a policy of détente with the Soviet Union, easing tensions and signing the first major nuclear arms limitation treaties. He effectively ended the very bloody and divisive Vietnam War, bringing American troops home.
We today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam.
And here's something that might shock you, especially given modern politics. Environmental policy had not been a significant issue in the 1968 election, and the candidates were rarely asked for their views on the subject. Nixon broke new ground by discussing environmental policy in his State of the Union speech in 1970.
Shall we make our peace with nature and begin to make reparations for the damage we have done?
And in June, he announced the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. He also signed the Clear Air Act of 1970 and the Clean Water Act of 1972. In 1974, Nixon proposed more comprehensive health insurance reform. That is, a private health insurance employer mandate and replacement of Medicaid by state-run health insurance plans available to all, with income-based premiums and cost-sharing. Due to the persistence of domestic drug use, in addition to drug use among American soldiers in Vietnam, Nixon launched a war on drugs and pledged to cut off sources of supply abroad. He also increased funds for education and for rehabilitation facilities.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Another policy initiative was Nixon encouraging more money to be put into cancer research and treatment. He signed the National Cancer Act on December 23, 1971. In addition to desegregating public schools, Nixon implemented the Philadelphia Plan in 1970, the first significant federal affirmative action program. He also endorsed the Equal Rights Amendment and pushed for African American civil rights and economic equity through a concept known as black capitalism. Nixon had campaigned as an ERA supporter in 1968, though feminists criticized him for doing little to help the ERA or their cause after his election. Nevertheless, he appointed more women to administration positions than former President Lyndon Johnson had. And also, on space policies, on May 24, 1972, Nixon approved a 5-year cooperative program between NASA and the Soviet space program, culminating in the 1975 joint mission of an American Apollo and Soviet Soyuz spacecraft linking in space. Domestically, his legacy is far more progressive than most people realize, marking him as one of the most accomplished presidents in U.S. history. But, and with Nixon, there is always a but, because all of those incredible achievements are now buried under the shadow of one word: Watergate. After all was brought to light, Richard Nixon did the unthinkable. On the evening of August 8, 1974, Richard Nixon resigned from the presidency of the United States, becoming the first and only president to do so. He issued what would be known as his last speech as president.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President.
So what next? What happens to a president after he resigns in total disgrace? Nixon retreated to his Western White House in California, a broken and bitter man. A month after he resigned, his successor, Gerald Ford, issued him a full pardon, sparing him from any criminal prosecution. The country was outraged, but Ford argued it was necessary to heal the nation. For years, Nixon was an outcast, isolated, battling health problems, and writing his memoirs. His slow crawl back to public life began with a series of famous television interviews with British journalist David Frost in 1977. In these interviews, Frost finally cornered him on Watergate. In a moment of shocking candor, Nixon heavily expressed that
was a voluntary impeachment. And I have to carry that burden with me for the rest of my life.
Over the next 2 decades, he painstakingly rebuilt his reputation. He wrote 10 books, traveled the world, and became an unlikely elder statesman, advising subsequent presidents on foreign policy. He never fully escaped the shadow of Watergate, but he managed to carve out a new role for himself. Richard Nixon died on April 22, 1994, after suffering a severe stroke. He was 81 years old. His funeral was a remarkable event, attended by 4 sitting and former presidents, a testament to the complicated legacy he left behind. To some, he will forever be remembered as the crooked president. But for others, he was a policy strategist and visionary who reshaped the world for the better.